From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Colorful agriculture, that's a Valentine's Day tradition.
It's a lot of work, it's hot, it's labor intensive.
Check out the business of fresh cut flower farming. An important deadline approaches regarding Mexico and its plan to ban imports of U.S. GMO corn, as U.S. meat exports post big numbers.
I think the real theme here is it's broad-based growth.
But how long can record shipments overseas last? Look ahead right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. 2022 will go down as a big year for beef exports. The U.S. Meat Export Federation reporting last year set a record, and it says pork had a strong finish to the year too. AgDay's Michelle Rook joins us with a breakdown of the numbers.
Clinton, U.S. beef exports set annual records for both volume and value in 2022. While pork exports finished lower year over year, export value is still the third largest on record. Now, what makes this even more impressive is the strong performance came in the face of many supply chain headwinds in the last year and COVID lockdowns in China. U.S. beef export volume totaled 3.54 billion pounds. That's up 3% from the previous year. The value is also a record at $11.7 billion, up $1.2 billion or 10% from 2021. Now that's nearly 40% above the previous 5-year average.
Yeah, it'll be a new record on volume and value. We're going to be up 3 or 4% on volume, and value is going to come in just under $12 billion in sales, which is easily a record over last year's $10.5 billion. And I think the real theme here is it's broad-based growth.
For 2022, pork exports totaled 6.34 billion pounds. Now that's down 8.5% from a year ago, largely due to China sales, which dropped 26% after hitting a record in 2021. However, export value was $7.7 billion. That's down just 5% from 2021.
It's off of a record in 2021 and probably our third largest export year ever, so still pretty good. So yeah, once again, the theme the same as beef, broad-based growth.
Mexico was the leading pork customer, setting a record for volume in 2022, which was up 10% from the previous year. Export value soared 21%, topping the $2 billion mark for the first time ever. Now, USDA forecasts beef exports will decline roughly 13% this year to slightly over 3 billion pounds. Pork shipments are expected to inch up 0.2% to 6.35 billion pounds. However, USMEF is slightly more optimistic with the relaxing of COVID restrictions in China.
All right, thanks, Michelle. The level of beef and pork supplies at the end of last year impacted one U.S. chicken company's bottom line. Pilgrim's Pride reporting a surprise quarterly loss last week. The CEO saying they underestimated meat production at the end of last year. They had expected total meat supplies to tighten by the end of 2022 because of U.S. ranchers having to slash the size of the cow herd due to drought. As a result, Pilgrim's Pride ramped up chicken production, but retail chicken demand rose by just 1% due to the higher than expected beef and pork supplies. Pilgrim's Pride expects beef supplies will shrink later this year and says it is now seeing some customers switching to chicken. Mexico has until tomorrow to respond to a U.S. request to explain the science behind its plan to ban GMO corn coming from the U.S. Now that's according to a report from Reuters. It says the U.S. Trade Representative's new chief ag negotiator, Doug McCallop, set the deadline. McCallop says Mexico's response will help decide the next steps in the issue. One option, a dispute settlement process under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. Now, you'll remember in January, McCallop, along with other U.S. ag trade officials, traveled to Mexico to talk about this issue. The trade team labeled proposed changes offered by Mexico as, quote, not sufficient and not grounded in science. Now, Mexico's president has issued a decree to phase out GMO corn by the year 2024. Now, recently, the country said it would delay the ban until 2025, and last week it said it would issue a new decree that if U.S. GMO corn passes sanitary filters, it will be allowed in the country. Some portions of the country will finally pick up some much-needed rain this week. Meteorologist Chuck Heaver joins us with an update.
Well, given the fact that it's the middle part of February, the country really has not seen that much cold air intrusion. If you look back here at the U.S. drought, the west side of the country is dry. The east side of the country is normal, except down in the northern part of Florida. But the center part of the country remains that bullseye for exceptionally dry conditions. And that looks like it's going to continue because most of the precipitation estimates that you see here over this week are going to be located down in the southeast, where we've seen that over the last couple weeks, and the Pacific Northwest. Yes, some scattering in the center part of the country with a couple frontal boundaries to push through, but overall most of the precipitation will be there. Hey, what do you think of this? Jacob Wade of Hayworth, Illinois, announcing Plant 23 is on in central Illinois. He says well-drained work ground and dark soils are where it's at for a really early soybean planting. I'll have more forecasts coming up.
All right, thanks, Chuck. It appears the price of eggs may finally be on the way down. Check out research firm Erner Berry's Egg Index, and you can see the drop from the peak in December. It says the wholesale price of a dozen Midwest large eggs fell last Monday to $2.61 a dozen. That's a 52% drop from a record of more than $5 a dozen back in December. But consumers are still shelling out more for eggs right now, with retail prices staying in the $4 range. That's according to Nielsen IQ data. The industry hit hard by a bird flu outbreak that impacted millions of egg-laying hens.
Win the Furrow programming on AgDay is sponsored by Xyway brand fungicides from FMC. Get season-long systemic disease protection from the inside out, from root to tassel and stalk to leaf. Go long with Xyway brand fungicides.
As we work to win the furrow ahead of planting this week, good soil health is always vital. Well, over the last few decades, concentrations of sulfur in the atmosphere have fallen significantly. Take a look at these maps. This shows the sulfate ion wet deposition from 2000, which again is how much falls from the atmosphere during a rain. Now compare that to 2016. Less sulfur pollution is leading to less sulfur deposited back into the soil, and it's a key nutrient in plant growth. Farm Journal field agronomist Missy Bauer has been studying this and looking at a soybean plant's response to added sulfur. Now she's found adding a dry ammonium sulfate at the V3 or V4 growth stage can make a significant impact on yields in soils with less organic matter.
That 3-year trial, we're looking at just shy of a 4 bushel response to putting sulfur on the soybeans in season. So back then, on the economics before bean prices really rose, we were talking, just shy of $19 an acre.
Wow.
Net return after we pay for the sulfur. Certainly, as you go across the field, we've got, soil zones that have much greater organic matter levels. So we're looking at, well, maybe I don't need the sulfur there and I just need it on the lower organic matter level type soils. So we're looking at that as a possibility. And the initial plots we did last year in 22 look pretty impressive just off our first year. And we just got a few pictures from some of those. But again, big sulfur responses where you can see ammonium sulfate, a darker, greener leaf. The leaves themselves are bigger compared to where we have the checks. Just an overall kind of bigger, bushier plant. We're adding a little higher pod count to these as well. So it can get pretty impressive with what we're seeing.
She says they've found those mid-season applications seem to impact plant health longer into the season. Bauer recommends trying some test strips. She says seeing a difference in color almost always translated to yield. And if you're trying to get ready to plant, be sure to stop by bnmcropconsulting.com. They've got an online planter clinic, and be sure to use discount code FJ20. Grains had a strong day on Friday, but will that carry into this week? We'll have market analysis coming up next. And later, as hot used equipment markets carry on, today Machinery Peak shares his advice for young farmers looking to buy. That's after weather. Oil started to rally at the end of last week after Russia said it will cut oil production by 500,000 barrels a day next month, after Western countries capped the price of Russian crude over its action in Ukraine. And that spilled over into other commodities, as AgDay's Michelle Rook tells us in this morning's Markets Now.
And joining us, Tommy Gersafi with Advanced Trading, and a pretty good day on Friday in the grains, Tommy, and it looked like we were chasing a lot of geopolitical headlines, including Russia cutting oil production.
Yeah, last Friday was interesting, Michelle. Oil trading above 80, every day above 80, actually starts to get you to think, are we going back towards 90? Are we going back towards 100? As we come upon the 1-year anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine invasion, news cycle was pretty quiet the last few months, and it looks like things are starting to pick up. And you had noted, you had told me, have I looked at how short the funds are in Board of Trade wheat? And yes, the funds are so short that wheat that if they go to cover, I don't know where the liquidity is going to come from if they all want to hit the exit door all at once. So that could be very interesting.
Yeah, they were in that same shape last year right before the war broke out. So certainly they could cover those and have an explosive rally there. Do you think that we'll continue to go that direction here this week, that momentum technically? Will we see that? Will we trade South American weather? What will be the driver as we start a new week?
Yeah, as a couple things. We're looking at our spring weather already, but all eyes on South America. When you look at a $15 bean price, that's absolutely amazing. So a couple things I'm looking at as both a trader and a brokerage advisor, how low volatility is. Volatility in corn and beans, if someone wanted to buy upside in beans or corn, it's relatively cheap. The put's even cheaper. So you look at that put call skew, and it's not expensive to buy a floor. You tie that with what's happening with the month of February with crop insurance, and really, is the market going to keep going? Yeah, Michelle, you and I have done this for a long time. These prices in wheat are good prices, but they're so much lower than where we were a year ago that mentally and psychologically we think they're low prices. But if you look at a long-term chart, these are decent prices in wheat. $9 spring wheat's not a bad price, but you're upset that you didn't sell $13 wheat 6-7 months ago, Michelle.
All right, well, some good advice this morning. Thanks so much, Tommy Griffiths, Advanced Trading, and we'll have more AgDay coming up.
Interested in spending a day with a trader? Call Tommy Griffiths at 800-664-4383.
AgDay is brought to you by Germinator Closing Wheels. Perfected in conventional, excels in no-till. Order 12 to 16 rows today and qualify for free shipping or 20% off an end zone moisture management package.
All right, let's take a look at the root zone here, and you can see again out in California, thankfully, we have wet and moist conditions, but the center part of the country, as I had mentioned on the drought monitor, is really, really dry. That runs right up the center part of the country. Off in the east, not too bad, some spots of dryness here and then in northern Florida, but hopefully we'll put a dent in that this week with some heavier rains that'll push through there. But overall, the country is relatively normal, again with some specific dry spots. All right, so let's take a look at the jet stream. You can see on Tuesday we have a lobe of cold air, very cold air moving into the Pacific Northwest, and that is going to lobe off and slowly work its way across the country. You can see here, there's the lobe I'm talking about, and on Wednesday or Thursday, that's going to form a storm. We're going to see that storm push up through the Midwest, and that'll give us a chance for showers through the Great Lakes, and then that colder lobe of air pushes down and impacts the Northeast briefly, but it's short-lived, and there we go again. Back to a zonal pattern. It's been a very, very mild February, in fact, a very mild winter, and that's going to continue, it looks like, especially towards the latter end of next week. So below normal for February out to the west, we've had several cold air intrusions there, but above normal for the February temperatures. It's just incredible what we're seeing here on temperatures. And then precipitation-wise, in mid-February, we're looking at above normal. That's in association with several storms that'll push through and lay down some decent precipitation all the way down into northern Florida. And then again in the Midwest, we'll see a couple storms push through. It looks like on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. Here's a precipitation forecast for the week. We see the heavier rain showers down to the southeast. You can see that building here. Somewhere upwards of 3 inches, definitely not out of the question. 2 will be the norm. And then out in the mountain west, you can see, a couple showers hit the slopes, maybe with some snow showers, and then the Pacific Northwest getting in on more precipitation. Here's a look at your Monday map. Relatively tranquil throughout most of the country. We'll have that storm form up. All right, let's take a look closer to home. Sheldon, Iowa, your high at 38 and low 31 with sunshine. Over in Cumberland, Maryland, high 51, 32 for the low. And let's go on to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 42 and 32 with sunshine.
What's the best strategy for buying used equipment? Machinery Pete says, think opposite. That advice next. And later, flowers are always good advice for loved ones on Valentine's Day. We'll look at the cut flower business in Tennessee, in the country. Machinery Pete is here, and he says sometimes the rule of opposite applies in the used equipment business.
My friends at Compeer Financial, a great branch of farm credit services here in the upper Midwest, recently invited me to speak to an event they were having for young farmers. And I tell you what, folks, one of my most favorite things to do is talk to young farmers, share some of this gray-haired, hopefully wisdom that I've learned along the way, share some things I've learned from mistakes I've made. And I tell you, the number one thing I told the young farmers at that event was something, to me, a theory that I've tried to live by, the theory of opposites. So specifically when you talk about markets, whether it's a stock market, farmland, even used farm equipment, train yourself to be aggressive when others are pulling back. And conversely, when the market's too overheated, let everyone else pay too much, you pull back. So I shared the example of a John Deere 8230 tractor. Now, of course, the market's been on fire here the last couple of years. And in fact, the 6th highest auction prices we've ever seen on John Deere 8230s have all come since June. And here's a look. Those top 6 prices go from $175,000 up to $212,750. Wow. Now, conversely, let's go back in time 8 years to 2015, and that was the bottom of the used farm equipment market. Now, I wrote a column at the end of 2015 in Farm Journal, and I said, folks, if you're able, you'll never have a better chance to be a buyer than right now. And here's a look at the highest auction prices on John Deere 8230 tractors back in 2015. And again, these are the highest prices, from $105,000 up to $127,000. Look at those low hours. So again, when nobody felt like buying back then, if you could, the value you got, whether it's land or machinery, the stock market, again, that's how you can make your fortune.
Great advice. Thanks, Pete. You know what else is good advice? Getting your loved ones something special on Valentine's Day. Up next, the business of cut flowers in Tennessee.
Your next piece of equipment is on machinerypete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on machinerypete.com. In the Country on Ag Day is brought to you by Pivot Bio. What if you had the nitrogen you need already on seed? Pivot Bio is the first company to apply nitrogen on seed. The nitrogen you need, now on seed, from Pivot Bio. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Valentine's Day is tomorrow, which means it's a big day for the cut flower business. As Charles Denny reports, the University of Tennessee's Institute of Agriculture works with cut flower growers across the state to increase their business and create a stunning product.
Call it floral farming. You don't ordinarily think of a field of cut flowers as a cash crop, but this is a growing part of Tennessee's ag economy. Operations are popping up around the state, and other landowners are considering the flower business.
We do flower parties where people come and do cut your own flowers and jar them. We do that as well, but we're wanting to expand that this year, so hopefully it'll grow bigger.
80% of the flowers you see in stores are imports, but American florists still grow and sell nearly $5 billion worth of cut flowers every year and look for that to increase.
Cut flowers are easy to grow and can produce a solid income. Farmers markets are a good place to sell, and an acre can produce upwards of $25,000 in sales, depending on the variety.
It's a lot of work, it's hot, it's labor intensive, and sometimes we just look at the beautiful flowers and think, oh, this looks like so much fun, but it is a lot of work, but it's also very rewarding.
UTIA experts say cut flower farms are also a great place where customers can support local agriculture.
Buying something that has that story, the history of the farm itself, or how being more connected to the land, more connected to agriculture, people really like that. That's helping drive the demand for local cut flowers. There's also that feel-good culture.
So, with Valentine's Day and then spring coming soon, flowers are a way to mark the season, adding beauty to your home or office. Meantime, your purchase is an endorsement for colorful agriculture. This is Charles Denny reporting.
All right, thanks, Charles, and that's all the time we have this morning. I'm sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.